and zip everything in the project folder and upload in the LMS. Okay, so next is module assignment date for 3 was on 29th, but we didn't study that. Yeah, so it can be an issue with the system, like when the project was set it up. So please avoid that. Don't worry about it. So because we haven't covered the module 3 yet, so it's fine. We'll cover it today, and you can submit the assignment in the later part. So it won't be any kind of a negative points for you. Okay, next is from Chetan. Chetna, sorry. It's the interface creation was not mentioned. Okay, we'll cover that. Next is yeah. So Vinish is saying the size of the zip file is assignment without the node modules is large than 20 MB. Let's see. Yeah. So in that case, you can avoid adding the .angular folder because this is a new folder which is added. Sorry, earlier this was not there. So it has the cache for all the files which are created. So what you can do is when you are creating the zip file, do not add the .angular folder and the node modules folder. So yeah, that's a change which you have to do. If you're uploaded through the drive, that's also fine, won't be a problem. Next question is what version of Angular you are using, you are working on in your work. I generally work on like older versions of Angular right now. So I'm working on Angular 12, and because every year, every 6 months they release a new version, so it's very hard to move your project to the latest one every time. So we are working on 12, but 12 and 13 are quite same. They just have some major like code issues only fixed, but 14 is something which is a little bit new. It has new improvements in it. Okay, so I got a question from Kunal. The query is about my Decorator profile. I'm not able to access any learning resource. I contact the support team. So okay, so Kunal, can you do me a favor? Can you send me your email address which you have registered with? I will tell the team personally that this person is not able to access it. So Raj, for covering the assignments, you have to go through the videos. If you have missed the previous 2 assignment sessions, you have to go through the videos for the last 2 sessions and cover them. So in the last part of the videos, you will generally get the assignment details, like what has to be covered. That's about it. Google Drive, that is fine. Okay, so Somnath, your question around the interface, I will cover that in the code. Sachin is asking any good website for Angular learning. I think the Angular site, the Angular documentation is quite good. And if you go through the documentation only and follow their steps, you will learn more than any other resource which I've seen. Okay, so Shashank's question. So what is Shashank's question? Shashank, give me a second. So Shashank, what is the question actually? I don't know, like last 45 minutes of the topic was not clear. So what topics are not clear in that case? You have to be very specific, like 45 minutes is quite long. Okay, so you have questions on interface? Sure. I also got some other messages regarding interface only. So we'll cover that. So Lakshmi is asking 13 IV eliminates I11 support. Yes. So after that, I11 support is not there. So it is common with other libraries and frameworks also, like React also has deprecated the support for I11. And it's not even supported by Microsoft now. So that's why a lot of companies or frameworks are removing the support for I11. Okay, so I will start with the session now. So we have gone through a lot of questions. Any other questions, we'll answer them later. Okay, so the last question I got, I'll just answer this one only. So is Angular support SEO? No. So Angular code by default doesn't support SEO. You have to use some tools like server-side rendering, or you have to, there are some tools which actually allow you to create HTMLs from the Angular code base and then provide SEO support for it. But by default, it's a single page application, so it's not good with SEO. All right, so that's the last question we'll answer, and we'll start our project. Okay, so coming to the question which I got for how to run the code on a different port. So what you can do is you can write npm start and a different port number over here. So you can pass a parameter to this code and say which port you want to start the code on. So I'll say 4500 and start the code over here. Oh yeah, this is for the project only. So in this case, why is it not? Okay, let me try serve gserve port and a different port for it. Okay, let's wait for it to compile. Yeah, now you can see it has started on port number 4500. So when you do ng serve, it can be changed, or you can go to the Angular JSON file. I've stopped the server. Go to Angular JSON. In the Angular JSON, go to the serve section over here. Okay, and you can provide options into it. And in the options, we can provide the port number which I want to start the application. So by default, it's picking up 4200. So it's over here. So I will just give you the right location. So in the Angular JSON file, scroll down, you will find a serve section. So this is the serve configuration. When you run ng serve or npm start, this configuration will be picked over here. Okay, so in this, you have to provide the option. So I can write, I want to pass in options. In the options, all of these options are supported. So I want to use the port option over here and pass in what port I want to use, like 4500. And this will start the application on port number 4500 when I say npm start or ng serve. So you can say it is running on port number 4500. Okay, so now if I go to my browser, instead of 4200, I have to run 4500, and this loads up. Okay, so coming to the questions which I've got regarding the code, I got this question: what is this interface? What we have? Okay, so if you're not clear about the interface, what this interface does is, so let's see where I am using this interface. I'll just search for this code, and here we are using this interface when I have these callouts. So how this code was structured? So let's go through the code. Let's open the draw file. Okay, this was a drawing which we did, and how we structured our components as. Okay, let's create a drawing over here. So I have this callout section. So on my page, if I scroll to my code, this section over here, which has the 4 types of news articles like monitoring, bi-direction. So these are, let's assume these are articles, and these are, each box over here is a component, is one single component. And what we do is that's our normal thing. Like as a developer, we have to break the code into smaller chunks. So what I did is I've broken up the code into two small components. So one component over here, let's see the inspect panel, how this is structured as. Let's see over here. Let's little bit reduce the size of it. So now I can see there are 4 boxes, and these 4 boxes are part of this component. So if you see my code over here, it says article callouts. This section over here. Okay, so this article callout or this article callouts is one big component which is creating the listing. So if I hover on this, so this shows me that this is the complete section which is creating the listing for me. Okay, now this section is one single component and it has 4 other sections in it, or 4 other features which are implemented. So let's see what are the structure for them. So you have 4 different calls in it. So these call trees over here, these call trees mean that I want to divide this whole section into 4 parts, and each of them will take specific size in Bootstrap. So this, for understanding these columns, you should first go through Bootstrap, how Bootstrap column grid layout structure works. Okay, so I have these 3 columns or 4 columns over here which are sized to take specific size on the screen. Now in them you'll find there is another component which is called as Decorator article callout. So this is one single component, and this one single component is responsible for showing one newsletter. Okay, so that's how our application is divided. So what we have is, we have the callouts section, and the callout section has one callout, 2, 3, and 4. So what I'm doing is, in this code, I am following a principle where we divide our code into smaller chunks. Instead of keeping one single component which has lots of things going on in it, what we are doing is we are splitting the code into smaller parts, so it's easier for us to manage and it's easier for us to test also. Like when later on when we're going to learn unit testing or automation testing, we need to break our code into smaller sections. So what I'm doing is, in this first callouts component, I will be storing some data, and that data will be shared with all of these callout individually. So what we have is, let's say this data will be provided by this over here. Now the role of callouts, like why I'm splitting this code into one big component that has 4 different components in it. The reason is, this callouts component will actually make our API request. We haven't learned about API request yet, but in the future what this code will do is, this callouts component is going to send a request to the cloud. So from your user system there will be an API which has to be called, and it's a REST API, sorry, REST API which has to be called over here. So this will send a request and get the data from that API and pass on that data to each of the components. So that's the ideal role we are always looking for. Okay. Now, when this callouts component needs to pass data to each of the component, which is callout, 4 components over here, I have used a special syntax in my code. So let's go through the code over here. Let's go to the first callouts component which has the data in our code. So we'll see I have all of this news data which is in my code. So this is the top ABS data which I've added in the file. So it's directly hard coded in the file. I know this may not be a good practice, but we haven't learned much more complex code right now. So this is the easiest way we can get data into our code. So we have these all news articles hard coded in our file. Now these hard coded news articles are assigned to a public property of my callouts component over here. Now I have an interface which defines that what is this type. So why do we have interface? So first of all, when you're working with TypeScript, the concept is that any variable which you're creating, it should have a defined type for it, so that anytime when you're using that, it is easy for you to understand what kind of values it has, and you can and the editor also can give you hints that what you are doing with the data. So let's see. I have this news article. Now I know this news article is a type of article. So what I can do is, I can say from this news, because it's an array of article. So I can say this dot news, which is this news property. I want to get the first news article and get different properties from it. So how does my editor know that what are the properties supported on the article based on this article interface? So if I write dot, it tells me that you can get author, category, content, ID, and this information. And if you go to author, the author will provide you email, profile pic, and all this information. So this is all derived from your interface. Now, let's say I remove this interface from here. I'll just leave it like this. And now I'll do the same thing. So I'll write square bracket 0. Okay, the reason why it's working is the TypeScript code also analyzed my data over here. So what it does is it automatically creates the interface for me if it knows the data, that what kind of data it is. So right now, because the data is completely hard coded over here, so it knows that what properties would be supported on it. So it automatically created a type for me. So here it can give me the same things like this. Okay, that's good. But what if the data is unknown? So I don't know what kind of data it is. It's going to be a news value, which will come in the future. So in that case, this is a scenario where you are getting a data from an API. Like when you are getting a data from the API, it's from a HTTP request. It's not hard coded in your application. So it's very hard for your editor to know what kind of properties are going to be supported. So that's why we have to add an interface. Now, if I run this code, it doesn't know what properties are supported over here. So it doesn't know any relevant values. So that's why what we do is whenever we create a variable, we say, okay, what is the data type for it? And assign that data type to our code. Now in Angular, or actually in TypeScript, there are two ways of creating these data types. So one is your interface, where you create an interface like this. You write export interface. Export means I want to export this from the code. What I want to create is the interface, and what is the name of the interface. So write what all properties are going to be supported over here. So my article interface supports ID, title, name, and all these properties. There is another way where you can write a type also. So you can say export type and what type of item I'm making. So I can say news and define different values regarding it. Okay, so we'll cover the types part later, that what is how to use a type. So for right now, we'll use interface for defining our type of value. So this kind of value is going to be supported. Okay, so if you are coming from a C background, you may also know that classes also support extensions. So in our Angular code, you will not see that I'm extending a class, but you will see that you are extending, I'm implementing something on top of it. So over here, you can see export class, this is the class name, and implements on init over here. So this on init is actually an interface. So if you see hover on it, you will see it says interface on init, and on init, what it does is it's a lifecycle hook which asks us to create a ng on init method on our code. So this syntax over here, which is for implements, this is equal to a abstract class which we create. So when you're extending a class, there is a concept of abstract classes, where we'll say my class extends another abstract class, and you have to fulfill all the requirements for the abstract class in your code. The same thing is done with the interface, but the difference is when you are extending some class with the abstract class, you can only attach one abstract class. So you can only say extends, and you can write any abstract class name which you have. Okay, so you can just create an abstract class and pass it over here, and you cannot have multiple abstract classes. But with implements, it follows the same funda, but it also allows you to have multiple interfaces attached to it. So you can say it also implements on init, on destroy also, like this. So now when I say on destroy over here, it asks me to create a ng on destroy method, which is not available in this class. So interfaces are also used for implementing them on a class or as a data type. Even if I implement the article interface over here, it will give me an error that the article interface does not have these properties which are called as title, content, and all. So your interface can be also implemented on a class which you have created. So if I use only the ng on destroy, you can see now the on destroy has been added and there is no error on this code. Okay, so your interfaces are used for adding custom data types depending on what type of data you have, and it tells your editor that what are the code hinting you have, and also helps you in finding out errors. So I will show you an example of how it helps me in understanding errors in my code. See, in my code, I know there is news, so I will write this dot news, and I will pick the first news by writing square 0, and there is a property in the news which is called as is top news, and it is a Boolean property. So now if I write is top news and assign it to a number, the code will start giving me error. So it will say type assignment number, type number is not assignable to type Boolean. So why it is important for me? Because the code is doing a static type check for me. So without even running this code, I know that I have done something wrong, because the implementation or the interface actually says that this value has to be a Boolean value, but I'm assigning it to a number. So there is something wrong which I have implemented in the code, and I have to fix that even without even running this code or getting it compiled and checking it on the browser. So I can say, okay, yeah, it has to be numbered, so that's a big problem, or a Boolean. So I will just correct my code saying, okay, yes, if it is a Boolean value, then I will only pass in a Boolean value to it instead of passing a number. So this will help me making sure my code will run same way in different scenarios and find out errors happening based on dynamic data types which are been switching in my code. Okay, so that's it. Any questions on it now? Okay, so if you want to learn more about classes, then use this link and questions. Okay, so I got a question. Can we call data from external file? Yes, you can. So I can show you example for it, but we are going to implement an API request and get the data from a REST API and use it in our code. So yeah, I will show you example for both the scenarios. Any other questions? All right, so let's go to our content and let's see what topics we have to cover for today. So we have topics regarding data binding and animation. So we're going to cover data binding, different types of data binding, Angular animations, and lifecycle hooks. So these are the topics which you have to use. So what is a REST API? So REST API is a way when you are going to deploy your project, you will not have all the data in it. So let's say you are creating an e-commerce application. So if you have like hundreds of products, you will not keep the data of all the hundreds of products in your Angular app. You will keep them in a backend API or a JSON API, which will be called from your Angular code, and you will get the data into it and use that data to present the user with the right details. This API will be developed by your backend team. So if you are a front-end developer, you will implement the Angular code, and the backend team will create the Node.js APIs or any APIs, REST-based APIs on any of the languages like .NET, C#, your Java, PHP, any kind of a language which can be used on backend can be used for creating these REST APIs and get data into Angular code. But that is something which your backend developers will do. Okay. Next is what is the abstract class? So abstract class, you can go through the document link which I've sent you, but I will just cover. Abstract class is a way when you are implementing inheritance. Abstract classes are used for providing a kind of a blueprint that what your class, the actual implementation class will have in it. So it's you have to go through. Actually, this is not a topic which I generally cover with this code. This is something which you have to learn using how inheritance works in C or other languages and how abstract classes are used. Next is ng init is a default interface. Yes, so every component which you create, it has a interface which is added as ng init. So in your Angular code, there are lots of interfaces which are inbuilt into it, and you have to use them for doing different things. If you're creating something kind of a custom data, then only you have to create your own interface. So I will show you the required interfaces when we are going through the specific code. Okay, next is API and REST API two different things? No. So API means like application interface, or where you can interact with the application. So REST is a kind of an interface. So depending on what type of application you're building, you will have different APIs. Like you may have a JSON API, or you may have a REST API, you may have a GraphQL API. It's kind of a different standards which are to interconnect two different applications. Okay, so next question is, can front-end developer bind REST API and get data? So yeah, a front-end developer, the main job of front-end developer is this only, that get data from a REST API or any other HTTP API and get the data into your application and show the right content on it. Okay, so first we are going to cover data binding. So we are going to implement data binding, develop understanding of Angular animations, and see Angular application hooks or Angular component hooks. So what is data binding? So okay, I will cover the ng on it later. That's something which we have to cover in the last part of this session. So we'll cover that. Okay, so let's go through it. So first is what is data binding? So data binding is a way where your business logic will communicate with your template. So what is your business logic in your code? So the TypeScript code is your business logic. That's your model, and a communication has to be done with the template. So the HTML file you create, that is something which you have to communicate with and pass on your data. So there are multiple ways of how data binding works in Angular. So you have one-way data binding, you have two-way data binding. So till now, what we have done is we have worked with only one-way data binding, where my template uses the data which is made public in my class. So I have created some properties in my class as public, and those properties are accessed in my template. So that is one-way data binding. The two-way data binding is where the communication will be done from your model, your business logic, the TypeScript code, and your template, and the template can also send data back to your TS code. So this is two-way data binding. Two-way data binding is generally used when you have implementation of forms. You are taking user input. The user is typing in a form, and that also has to be received in the TypeScript code to be sent to a different server or something. You use two-way data binding. Okay, so now when you're doing two-way data, or when you're doing data binding, there are different ways of handling the binding. So you have string interpolation. So this is something which you already have worked with, where you create the set of curly brackets and you pass in the name of the variable which you want to use. So over here, the flow works from, if you see this on the arrows on the screen, the flow is right to left. So your TS code is the component class that will have some data, and that will be shown on the model, on the DOM for the user to see. Okay, so you will have some properties, you will use curly braces and write the property name which you want to show to the user. Next is property binding. So this is something which we have implemented in the last session, which is where you write square brackets, and the square brackets will have a name of a property which you want to pass to a component or any DOM element, and you assign a value to it. So that is your property binding. Next is event binding. So event binding is a way where the direction changes. Now the events will be triggered on the HTML template, and the template will send information to the component TS class that something has happened. So it will be for like if you click on something or if you trigger something. So that is your event binding. Next is two-way data binding. Two-way data binding is implemented on controls like input boxes, select box, text area, where your component can send some default value to the HTML DOM, and the DOM will send you value back to the component class when the user interacts with it, like when the user selects some value in the select box or type something in the input box. That is two-way data binding. So I got a question. Callouts to callout component, what kind of data binding is it? So that is your example of a property binding. So your callouts component, if you see the structure of our code, the callouts component is this one. If you go to the HTML of it, I have the callout component in it, and it has a property called as article, which has been passed from the parent to the child. So property binding is always done from parent to the child elements, where you can see the callouts is your parent, and in the parent component I'm using the callout component, and that has the article property passed to it. Yeah, so in the example slides over here, the DOM means the HTML and the component means your class. Okay. Okay, so we have seen string interpolation where you have the component class, you write curly brackets, and the value will be passed to the HTML, so that can be shown on the screen. Property binding is the square bracket notation where you have a property, you pass a value to it, and that will be passed to a child element, child component, or it can also be used for modifying any HTML property. So your HTML tags also have few properties on them. You want to change the height and width of them, you want to change the class of class or CSS, any kind of property on it. You can use this for property binding of HTML elements also, or pass properties to components, depends on what kind of child element you are creating. Event binding is again for handling events, and two-way data binding is for input controls, where you are sending a value from your TS code to the HTML, or the HTML sends a value to the TS code. Okay, so let's set this up. Let's see how this works. So what we'll do is I'll just do a recap of it. So give me a second. This is our application which we have implemented. Okay, now I have a gallery component. In the gallery component, let's go to the TS file of it. In the TS file, I want to hard code some gallery data. So I will just write a property over here, public, and this property's name is gallery image. Okay, and we need to pass in an interface. So in this case, we'll create a new interface for it. So gallery image will have the heading, the subheading, and the image URL which we need to show on the screen. Okay. So the interface is something which you have to decide of what kind of data you are going to receive in your code. So over here, I will create a interface file. I will call it as gallery image dot ts, and over here I'm going to write export interface, and we call it as gallery image. And now in this, I want to create the heading. So heading is going to be a string there is a subheading which will implement. So we'll say subheading, that will be also a string, and image URL, like what image I want to show in this gallery. Okay, that will be also a string. Okay, so that creates my interface. Now we'll go to the gallery component and I will assign the gallery image to the gallery image interface like this. Okay, so when I assign it to this interface over here, you will see there is an error which shows type object is missing the following properties over here. So it says the gallery image interface which you're using, it requires you to have heading, subheading, and image URL in the properties. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, what properties are missing? So we'll say heading. So we'll write over here gallery image heading, that's my text. Second one which is missing is subheading. So write gallery subheading. And the last one is your image. So we'll write some image URL. So I don't have any image URL. What I will do is in the articles, there are lots of images in it. So just copy that one from there. Okay, yeah. So there is this banner image URL I can pick over there. Okay, so what I will do is I will add this image URL over here. So let's assume there is an image URL which you have to use. Now, when you are creating an interface, there can be a scenario that a particular value is not available. So let's go to the interface again. This was my gallery image interface. Let's say there is a property over here which is top news. So this is again a flag that it is a top news or not. And there can be a scenario that this property is not available. So right now, when I'm creating this record, I don't have this property defined over here because it's a property which may come or may not come, because every news is not a top news. There, in that case, my code over here will give me an error that property is top news on this gallery image type is not declared. So that will be a big problem. I have to, in that case, the solutions for me is I'll say is top news is going to be empty string like this, or a false value like this. So it's a not good solution. It's not a good solution because you have to define any values which are not even required in the code in your data. So it also is very problematic. Maybe some data is not available and you're trying to use it, which gives you a bad impression that this data will be available and this should work. So what we do is in our interface, we can also define there is some value which is going to be optional. So this is top news is going to be optional value because I have added a question mark in front of it. Okay, that means this value may or may not come in the final data. So now, even if I remove this from here, it will not give me any errors. So 3 of the items in the interface, these 3 are required, and this one is an optional value which you may or may not provide. So now when I check what items are required, it also shows me that is top news has a question mark next to it. That means it's an optional property. So if I want to add it, I can add it. If I add it wrong, then it give me an error that you're assigning a value string to a number, or sorry, string to a boolean. That's not correct. But if I assign it correctly with a boolean value, this will work fine. Or I can completely remove it because it's an optional value. Okay, so that's my gallery image data which I have created. Now I want to do data binding with it. So I will go to the template. In the template, what we'll do is we'll create a div tag, and in this div tag, I will create a heading, h1 tag, and h3 tag for the subheading, and image which I want to show like this. Okay, so I have to bind data to these properties. Now, what is the data? So that is the gallery image property which I have. So in my template, I will go over here and I will write curly braces. In the curly braces, I know there is a property called as gallery image. So I'll say gallery image dot. What properties I want to use over here? So I want to use heading, image URL, top news, or subheading. So I want to use the heading property over here. Okay, for the next one, again, I'll write gallery image and I want to use the subheading over here. And coming to the image, so image does not have any way of binding the property using these curly braces, because image is a self-closing tag, so you don't have to pass values to it. So you have to pass in properties to it. So what you do is you write square brackets again over here and pick the src property, which property you want to bind over here. So I want to bind the gallery image dot the image URL property to it. So in the previous example in the last week, I was using property binding for passing data from parent component to child component. That was using inputs, but you can also use the image, like any property binding, to pass values or properties to HTML elements also. So image is a HTML element. This is not a Angular component, and I'm able to pass a property to it, which is the src property, and the value of that is the image URL which we are getting. So now let's run this code and we see this kind of a layout, and something, it looks correct because we have an image which shows up over here. We have some gallery text over here, like image heading and subheading over here. Now to fix this, we can write some CSS. What we can do is we can say the image tag in it will take 100% width. Okay, yep, it takes 100% width. Few CSS things, we'll say this is going to be position absolute, and top 0, left 0, this is going to be position relative, and this shows up like this now. Okay, so yeah, little bit changes are required. So we'll say this has an overflow property on it. Okay, that's good. And we need to show the h1 and h3 tags also, so that's also gone. So we'll write position absolute. Actually, we'll write like this. Okay, why are they not shown? Yep, that is shown now. And for the h3 tag, you have to write the position over here. And what is the position for this? It's going to be, so we have to kind of align these on the screen. So we'll say this is going to be from the bottom. It's going to take 100 pixel. And this is going to take like 10 pixel from the bottom. Okay, yeah, looks good. Hundred is too high, so just set to 50. Let's see. Sorry. Yep, looks better. And over here, we also say from the left side, you will have a space for 10 pixel. Okay, yeah, a little better. We can increase the space from the left side. And sorry, yeah, it's better now. So we have this gallery which has been implemented over here with the image coming from the data, which has the data coming from the text and the subheading and the heading into it. Okay, so these CSS skills is something which I hope you have. These are not something which we have in the part of the course. I just added it to customize the look and feel of the code. If you have any questions on this, I can help you out with it, but can't go too much detail into teaching how CSS basics work. Okay, so what I can do is I can send you this code and try this out for how property binding works. So we have a property over here. In the TS code, we have HTML structure like this, and the CSS code over here like this. And I will commit these changes in the code also. So one thing which I need to do is, I don't need this file, so delete this file. Okay, so the code is also on GitHub. So if you want to go to the GitHub repository, you can get the code from there also. And if you have any questions regarding this code, how property binding is working, let me know. Otherwise, we can continue with the next topics. I will wait another for 2 minutes, and then we'll continue with the next topic. Okay, so if you have questions regarding the CSS properties I've used, I've sent a link in the chat. That will give you an understanding of how the position CSS properties work, the position property and the Z-index properties. Please go into that, look into it. Even after reading that, if you have any questions, let me know. So Sheikh, in the last session, we created an interface in the last class, and we used it as a interface only over here. So see, I have this example for the last class. This was the interface which I created, and this was assigned to a news property, and that news property was used in my template over. So it's the same code which I have done in the last class also. Yeah, so the code for the interface is over here. Give me a second. Here it is. Yeah, so the image property, image is, you're saying, yes, the image is a property. One second, Sheikh, I'm not able to understand your question. So you're saying image is a property, length is a property. How come article is a property? Can I unmute you and we can discuss on it? Yeah, sure. Give me a second. Okay, so I've unmuted you. Hello. Hello, Sheikh. Sheikh, I can hear you. What's the question? Sheikh, your voice is not clear. It's just a disturbance kind of a voice coming in. No, Sheikh, the audio is not clear. Sheikh, the audio is not clear. Sorry. Okay, so what we have done is we have implemented property binding in our code. Okay, so I got a question. What is the interface? I don't know about it. So what is the interface? Okay, so I'll just repeat again. So in JavaScript, when you have data types, there is an object data type. Object data type is used for creating keys like this. So like what is object first of all in JavaScript? So object is something which you write in curly braces. So we call it as dictionary in other languages also. In this object, you have different properties in it. So object has n number of properties which you can define on it. So it's up to you what properties you want to define on it. So when you're getting data from your database, like you run a SQL query or you run a MySQL query, MongoDB query, or you're running a query on any API request, they all will return you some kind of object which will have the data about you. So let's take the example about yourself only. So your name is Raj. So one of your property is your name. So what's the name? It's Raj. Okay. You're learning in this Educator session. So you can say which session you are from. You are from a session, and that's one of your property. So what kind of session is it? So it's a topic, we can say Angular. Okay. What class is it? So like it's the third class. So these kind of properties are used when you're defining something. So it's an entity which you're defining. So if I'm defining yours, if I'm defining your profile, so I will know there is a person in my team whose name is Raj. The person is doing the sessions on Edureka for Angular topic, and the person is in the third class right now. Okay, and then there can be other properties also on it. So there can be properties like uh, assignments. So what assignments have you submitted? So now when you are submitting some assignments, there can be multiple assignments which you're submitting. So you have like 12 modules to cover. You will submit 12 modules. So you will say assignment. Now assignment is going to be array, which means it will have multiple items in it. And in the assignment also, you can have again an object which will define further properties to it. So what is the first property of this assignment? Like we can say what module it is. So it's for the first module. Completed, we can say completed. Yes, it's completed. Then if you have submitted any other assignment, then we can say, okay, let's create another object, and you have these objects over here. Now the interface is kind of a blueprint. The interface, when you implement an interface, it tells us that what kind of data I can expect for. It's not the data, it's nowhere near to the data. It's just a blueprint which tells you that, okay, you will expect this kind of a data when this is available. Okay, so if I want to implement an interface for this data, I will say, okay, interface candidate in my batch is this person who has name, and the name is going to be a string. So I'll say string okay. The person is doing some sessions. What sessions are they doing? So we'll write they're doing topics on this session, and the session topic is again going to be a string. Then which class the person is on right now. So we'll say another number, and then the assignment. So you're doing some assignments. We'll say, okay, now we'll say assignment. And that will be, now in this case, when I have assignment data, which has further objects in it inside the array, I should actually create another interface and say I have assignment interface, and the interface has two properties in it, which is module, which is going to be a number, and completed is going to be a Boolean value. And I can use this assignment over here as an interface saying, okay, so the candidate will have name, session, which session they are in right now, the assignments which they have submitted, which is going to be a type of assignment interface or an assignment type, and it's going to be an array of these values. So this gives me a blueprint that what kind of a data I can expect for in the future. It's not available in this code, so you're implementing only the interface. You only know that what kind of data it is going to be. It doesn't mean that this is the actual data. Now, when you're using this kind of interface, the editor, the Visual Studio Code editor, understands this and shows you the right hinting, that when you say dot something, it will show you the use, like over here. When I have this kind of a code, Now if I write this dot gallery image dot, so it tells me that okay, the gallery image has 4 items in it. 4 of the items are 3 of the items are in this are required, and the is top news is a optional item which is having a question mark next to it, because that's the optional value. So I can say okay, what is the heading? Heading is going to be a number, and it gives me error that you cannot assign a number to a string, because it knows that the heading has to be a string value which is in the blueprint or the interface, and you are assigning it to a wrong value. So that's why we use interfaces. Okay, Raj, is it clear now? All right, so we have seen how to do property binding for the gallery image. Now, the next step is we have seen 2 types of data binding in this case. So we have seen the string interpolation and the property binding for HTML tag. So this is, remember this over here is a HTML tag. It's not a component. So you can pass properties to a HTML tag also. So in some cases, what you can do is you can write like this also, and it will not pick the value. Why is it not picking the value then? So do you see the red image? No, I don't see the red image, but it adds the image tag over here, and the image tag has the value over here, which is gallery image URL. So it doesn't actually has the URL over here. It has the text directly over here, which is not the right value. So what's happening in this case? So if you write like this, just write src and the variable which you want to bind to. This assumes that the src has a value of this over here. It is not picking the value from the property. It is just writing this as a string over here only. So whatever you have written as a string, that will be the value of src. And in our case now, that's the wrong value. So src property is added on the image, but the value of that is the text, which is gallery image dot image URL. So that's not the image URL. That is just a name of the property which I want to look for. Okay, so it's not correct. And if you write like this kind of a code, you can correct this by writing this kind of syntax. Now if I run this code, it will be able to pick the URL and shows over here the image URL like this. Okay, so to fix this kind of a code, I will write src, but I will write curly braces on the property and get the value. So instead of doing this kind of a code, we prefer to have a square bracket syntax and assign a variable to it which we want to get the value from. So this is the right approach which you have to use. Okay, any questions on this? Guys, any questions on this? Any topic you have questions on right now? So you have covered one-way data binding using string interpolation and property binding on HTML elements. Okay, so next would be event binding. So when you have some button or when you have some text, anything, any HTML element which you have, and you want to bind some events to it. So it's very easy. So let's say I have this h1 tag, this heading tag, and when I click on the heading, I need to show some pop-up or just a message to the user. So what I can do is I can write event binding over here. So I'll write round brackets, so not square brackets. It's going to be round brackets. In the round brackets, it will show you the list of all the events which are supported. So I want to use the click event. So I write click. And in this, I need to write a handler, a function which will handle my click event. So something which will get triggered when I click on it. So right now, I don't have any function which handles this code. So I'll go to the gallery component. In the gallery component, I will create a function over here saying show message to user, okay, or show alert to user. Okay, you can call this function as any other name, I'm just creating it like by this name, and over here you will write alert and we'll write some message over here. So let's say hello world, like this. Okay, so the function name is show message. So sorry, it should be show alert to user. So let's say show alert to user and add it over here as a function. So I'll write the name of this function over here and call this. So now when I go to the code and click on this text, it shows me this alert over here. So this way we can handle out events on element. So any HTML element you have, you want to handle events on it, you can handle like this. Okay, so that's an example of doing a click event. So you can try this out. I'll give you 2 minutes for this. So only change which you have to do is in the HTML, you have to add the click event handler and the method in the TS code. Okay, so try this out. I will commit this code on the GitHub also. Okay, any questions if you have, let me know. Okay, so I got a message. Isn't this two-way data binding? No. So this is not two-way data binding. This is event binding. I will show you how two-way data binding works. So I got a message. Is there any disadvantage of using interpolation on source tag? No. So on the source attribute, if you are using the string interpolation, there is no disadvantage of it. But ideally, when you have properties, you should write like this, because performance-wise, it's the same thing. But when you use properties, it's much more clear that where the properties have been used and easy to debug in that case also. Okay, so now we're going to see how two-way data binding works. So for two-way data binding, I will ask you to create a new component. We don't want to change any of the code for the current components. So we'll go to our command line and create a new component over here. So I'll create a component over here. I will say ng-gc components, and I want to create a login component over here, or login form component like this. Okay, so run this command to create a new component for yourself. Okay, so have you created the component? Okay, so the component is created. So the component name is Edurica login form. So this will be a form where the user can provide the login credentials and login. So in this case, the user is also going to provide you some values, like they are also going to interact with the HTML and they will type in some value and I want to pick those values. So this is an example of a two-way data binding. So first I have to use this component somewhere in my application. So we'll go to my app and the app component HTML, and over here I am going to create a new row. And we'll create a column also here. I will say this is call 4. And in this call 4, I will add this login, Edurica login form. Like this. Okay, so this is added. And if I go to my screen, you will see there is a login form component which is added. I should actually create this before the footer. Somewhere over here. That's better. Okay. So this is the basic code for the app component HTML. I have this login form over here. Okay. Now I have to add in two controls to capture the user information and a button to submit the form and show the user's information, like just to show that okay, we have captured the data successfully. Okay, so how do we implement a login HTML form? So first of all, I have to use some kind of a HTML to create the form. So over here, I'm going to write p tag. In this, I will create a label. In the label, I will create an input tag for the HTML tag over here, the input. We'll define a type for it. The type of this is going to be a text. The name of this is going to be email. This is the name of the input field. Okay. And over here, I will also add the label value to be email address or email. Copy this again, add it over here. This will be our password. This is going to be type of password, and the name of this is going to be password. Then we need to create a button. So create another p tag. In this, we'll create a button. The button will have a type of submit, like this, and this will have a message in it, login. Okay, after this, this kind of a login form gets created over here. So it's a very basic one, so don't worry about it. We'll add some CSS later to it. It's fine. Okay, so that's my form. Okay, so now the form is created, and now we want to bind or do two-way data binding in this code. So two-way data binding in our Angular code is done through a special directive which is called as ng model. So what you do is you write square brackets. In the square brackets, you will write round brackets, and then you will write ng model in it, like this. Okay, so this allows you to do two-way data binding. So it will get values from your template to the TS code and from the TS code to the template. And what we need to do is we need to assign a value to it. So a property to it to which this value will be received. But right now I'm getting an error over here that cannot bind ng model since it's not a known property of this input. Yeah, so this directive is not by default enabled in your Angular code. So it's not available. You have to add the support for it. So what you do is you go to their app module. In the app module, add an import over here saying import from Angular forms, and add the support for the forms module. So in the app component, you will import this. And once the import is done, you will go to the import section of your module and add this section for the forms module. So update this import section and add forms module. So these are the two changes which you have to do. So first you have to import and then add it over here. So please make these two changes. Guys, anyone having issues with my audio? Is that clear or is it breaking? So this code which I'm sharing in the chat, this will be uploaded on GitHub. So I've already given you the GitHub URL on the starting of the session. If you check the chat, there it is. I'm uploading the code directly after that, after making the changes in it, or I will upload this to the LMS also. Okay, so the audio is clear for Madhumita and Aniket. So I think we can continue. So if you're facing audio issues, try to relog in again or check your network. Maybe you are having some network connectivity issues. Okay, so have you made these two changes? Okay, so have you made those changes? Can you continue? Great. Okay, so now we'll go to the login component. In the login form component, I'm not getting that error that this ng model is not defined. Now the error is different. So it says that it's not able to get the property on which this value has to be assigned to. So what you have to do is in your login form, you have to create a property over here. So it'll say public, and we'll create a property. You can call it as login form, anything you like. Like I will call it as form property, and I will assign it to interface. I don't have an interface right now. So again, I will create an interface over here. I'll say login form .ts and write export interface login login data, or you can call it as a login form. The login form will have two items in it: email, that is going to be a string, and a password, which is also going to be a string value. And yeah, that's it. We go to our form now, and over here I'm going to say this is going to be an interface login form, equal to object, and this object has email, which is an empty value, and password, which is also going to be an empty value. So these are the default values. If I have some already pre-filled values or default values to assign, I can assign them over here. Otherwise, I will just create them as empty. Okay, so this is your login property, and this property will be filled with the text which you have written in the form. Raj, please check your system. Maybe you have some audio issues because people are saying the audio is clear. Can you check your system? From my side also, it's saying the network is good and the audio is clear. All right, so now what I expect now over here is whatever I'm typing in the form, that should be added to this property. So I will go to my HTML, and over here I will write from the form. I will add the email property over here, and I will do a binding also over here for ng model, and say this will be equal to form dot password. So whatever values I'm typing in the form, they will be assigned to these properties. So the password value which I'm typing, that will be assigned to form dot password, and the email value which I'm typing, that will be assigned to form dot email. So guys, if you're facing some network issues, maybe that's why your screen share is not working properly. I can check. Let me check what's my speed right now. So I'm getting around 250, 300 Mbps of speed. So on my side, I think the network is good. If you have some problems with the network, that may be in your side only. Right. So please check network connectivity, maybe because other people are saying the network is good. And if you're using a phone, maybe just a 4G or a 3G connection, it may be another problem. Okay, so see, okay, coming back to what we are implementing. So what I'm expecting is when I type in the controls, in the input controls, the value which I'm typing in the email control should be added to this property, which is form.email. And the value which I'm typing in the password, it should be added to the form.password property. Okay, so that is something which I am going to add. Okay, so that's my expected result. All right, so now let's type something over here. Okay, how do I check this if it is correct or not? So if I'm typing something over here, I want to also check the values. I want to see what values we have. So another way is I can just write another p tag over here. In this p tag, I can write email, and the email is equal to form.email, and password is going to be password and password from form.password, like this. Now, if I type something in the code, in the input controls, we'll see it picks out the email address over here. So it shows that what I have typed in the email address over here. So if I write edureka at edureka.co, so it prints out edureka.co like over here. And if I type something in the passwords, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it also prints the value. So this is an example of two-way data binding, where you have a control. The control receives a value which the user is typing in, and it is showing that again on the template, and it also updates the value in the TS code also. So how this flow is working, so it first sends the value to the TS code. The TS code updates its local variable, and once that is done, it again sends that value to the template. Wherever the value has to be shown, it will be updated in that case. So this is an example of a two-way data binding which we have seen. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay, so I will send you the code again, Chetna. Please refer to that. Here it is. Great. Okay, so that's how we do property binding, event binding, two-way data binding, and string interpolation in our code. So any questions on this code? Anyone has any questions? So Jalaj, maybe there is some error in your code. Check in your browser what kind of error message you're getting. Yeah, you can do your screen share. I can send you the request. You're again using the wrong code. So just change the ng model with square brackets and round brackets over here. That will work. So guys, if you're not able to follow along on the code with on my screen, at least open the GitHub page which I've sent you. It will have the complete code over there. Just see what commits I'm doing, and that will give you the code. That's why I'm uploading the code to GitHub. See, if you go to GitHub, you can see what changes I did over there. Here, just go to commits, and the commits will show you that what changes I'm doing. So it's very easy. Okay, just click on commits. All the commits which I've done, they are over here. So you can just see, okay, what did I do for two-way data binding? So I added forms module, added the forms module over here. In the HTML, what kind of HTML code I've written. So you can easily find it out over here. Okay. All right, so let's continue and let's make a small change in this component. So we'll go to the gallery component now and update some, like we'll play with some kind of a form in it. So go to the gallery component. In this gallery component, I'm going to create a form. Okay, so write div, and on this we'll say p. In this p we'll write label. Okay, and input. Right, so in this input I'll write name. This is going to be called as heading. Okay, and I will write the label also over here as heading. I will copy this 3 times and call this as subheading. And yeah, I will just keep 2 of these. Image URL we don't want to change. Okay, and over here we'll create a button, and in this button we'll call update like this. Okay, so there is one small form which we're creating in the gallery component, and what I want to do is when this form gets shown on the screen, it allows me to change the heading and the subheading content over here, just to see that how will the changes look like on the screen. This is just a preview. It's not going to send a request to the API or change our hard-coded file. It's just a preview that how the changes will look like on the screen. So let me change this code over here. So write square brackets, round brackets, and say ng model in it. And over here, this is going to bind to gallery image dot heading. Okay, and this is also going to bind to gallery image dot subheading. Okay, heading and subheading. Okay, so that's done. Is it shown on the screen? No, it's not shown on the screen. The reason is because I have used some special CSS like Position Absolute over here. So that doesn't show on the screen. So what I will do is I will change the code in the CSS to make this show up properly on our screen. So I will change this to form tag and add some code for the form tag in the CSS over here. So I'll say this is also going to be position absolute. Okay, it's going to be from the top, it's going to be 10 pixel. From the right, it's going to be 10 px like this. Okay, so the form shows over here. Perfect. We'll make some small changes in it. We'll say some background color to it, like white. So it has a white background color, and this form shows over here. Now, if I type something over here, you can see the content also changes. If I type something over here, the content also changes over here. So this is kind of a preview for me that I can preview. If I want to type something new over here, it lets me type something and shows the updated content for me. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to hide show this form depending on a condition that in my HTML over here, there is a button. I will call this button as class edit button, and we'll call add button edit over here. Okay, so this is my edit button class. I will again go to my CSS and add CSS position properties to show this button somewhere on my screen. So I'll say top 10 pixel and right 10 pixel. Sorry, this button should show up somewhere over here below this form. So that is shown right now on the screen, but below this form. So what I will do is I will comment this form right now, and I have this button over here, and when I click on it, it doesn't do anything. So what I want to do is when I click on this button, it shows me the form and I can play with the changes on it. And when I click on the update button, the form should be removed from the screen and this button should be shown. So what I need to do, first of all, I need to handle an event on the edit. So here I'll say handle the click event and create a handler which is called as show form. Okay, so that will be added over here. And in my TS code, I will create a method for it, which is show form. Okay, perfect. Now, I also need to maintain the state. Is the form shown on the screen or not? So this is something which we have to do with the data. So over here, we'll create a property. We'll create a property, call it as is form shown. It is a state or a value to tell us that the form is currently shown on the screen or not. And this will be a Boolean value. And we'll say this is a false value right now, that the form is not shown on the screen. Okay, so what we'll do with this is we'll take this property and I'll write this dot, because I'm working in a class and I want to access a public property of the class. I will write this dot and which property I want to access. So I want to access the is form shown property and I will assign it to true. So when I call the show form method, it will set the property to be true in this case. Okay, so does it make any changes? No, the form is not shown. Why? Because the form is completely commented out over here. So I will uncomment this form and I will write a ng if. Remember we did ng if code in our session. So we'll write ng if and we'll write is form show. Okay, so here like this. So this will be value. If it is false, the form will not show. If it is true, the form will show on the screen. So okay, perfect. So now let's click on it and you will see the form pops up on the screen. So we have this form and I can make some changes. and play with the content of the form. Now, when I click on the update, the form should disable, like form should be hidden after this. So what I will do is on the button of this form over here, sorry, I will write on click. And the click handler will call a method as hide form. It's not implemented, so we'll go to the TS code and implement this hide form method also. So I'll say this dot is form shown is equal to false. Okay, so this will hide the form when I have clicked on the update button. So now let's play with this. So we'll say edit. Yep, it shows me. So see over here, it also shows me the current value. The current value over here is gallery heading, gallery image heading, which shows, okay, so it's actually picking the wrong value. Why? Because I am writing ng heading, and heading over here yeah, so the name is actually same over here, so it has to be subheading like this. Now if I run this code, yep, now it is correct. So it has gallery image heading, the first value, and the second value is subheading, which is shown as over here as subheading. So now when I change over here, this is important news kind of article, and over here I'll write this is very important news like this. So you can play with the content over here just to see how that has been updated. So this will update by using two-way data binding, and once you're done with the changes, you can click on update and that goes away and you have the new updated content on the screen. So this gives you a complete example. This whole step gives you an example of how two-way data binding works, how event binds, and how we can do string interpolation to receive the values. So everything is covered in this small example. Okay, so I will just recap what I did is I have an edit button. When I click on the edit button, it should show me a form which will allow me to update the content which is right now shown on the screen. So I'll click on the edit. Yes, a form is shown. Now it also has a value which is directly shown on the screen in the heading. The heading text which is shown is added into the heading input control. The subheading content is added into the subheading input control. So I can change any content over here. So I can write hello world. I'll say hi world like this. And now that has been also updated on the screen. And once the changes are done, I can say update and that form goes away. And I can just see how the new content will look like on the screen. Okay, so this is how it gives you an idea that how two-way data binding works, how event binding works, how string interpolation works in your example. Okay, so I got a question. It's a good question. Is there any necessary to use the input name input in the input field? Because we generally use it to pick the value in the input in a PHP, but there are we binding the value here. Yeah, so yes, the name is required. The reason is the form is still in an incomplete state over here. So this demo which I'm doing for the form, it's still not the complete demo of how the Angular forms are implemented. There is a few more steps which you have to do, and in those steps we need the name property. Okay, so those are something which we do once we start with the forms module, but for two-way data binding this is good enough to show you how two-way data binding works. So you need the name property, and the name property for each control should be unique. We don't worry about that how this data is being captured with PHP or anything, because we are not going to submit the data directly to a form using .NET, PHP or Java. We will be using REST APIs to submit this data to the server. So that's a completely different way how PHP or .NET handles the name. We're going to use a different way in this case. Yes, Somnath, I will give you the access.
Am I audible now?
Yes, Somnath.
Yes, I'm asking you that in that gallery.component.html, as the gallery images is the array, so if you will not use the array index here it will work fine. Means you have written just the gallery image dot heading and subheading.
Hmm.
So will it work without that index value now?
Sorry, I am using object only. I'm not using array.
No, no. Okay, you are using object only. And one more thing that in the assignment 2, it is given that yeah, I have to edit the part, edit and update in the same line. Means if I will click on the edit button, it should means the in that same text box I need to write. So how to do that? Could you please just give means
So
explain the things?
the form example which I showed you, is it clear with you?
That is clear. And one more thing, that the whenever you are typing, it is printing simultaneously. So I just want that whenever the button update button will be clicked, then only it should appear the whole things.
Yeah. Okay. So, but
So
are
how
you
to
clear
do
with?
that?
Wait. Are you
Yes,
clear with what I
I'm
have
clear.
done? Yeah.
Yes,
So,
yes, I'm clear
uh,
with the what you want.
the approach which I have used for showing this form, you can use the same
Hmm.
approach for updating your assignment also. I will not help you on the same day for the assignment because it's up to you that how to figure it out. But the approach which I've showed
Yes,
you,
yes.
the same approach will be used for implementing in the assignment.
Okay.
Okay. So if you have questions on the assignment,
Okay.
we'll discuss in the tomorrow session.
Yes.
First, try the assignment, and then we'll see
Okay.
what are the problems in it.
Okay. And my last question is that that whenever we'll click on the update button, it should show. Means as you are typing simultaneously, it is showing in the button. So I need to create another event, means another function, that whenever the on click event will happen on the update, then only it should show.
Yeah. So that we'll do later on once we start implementing the forms in our code.
Okay.
For the assignment also, you don't need that, and you can leave it like the way which I'm showing you right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Welcome. Okay, guys. Anyone has other questions on this code? So this will help you in implementing the assignment. So like I cannot completely show you how the assignment is implemented. So you can use this as a base to get understanding that you have to show some form and switch the form whenever required. Yeah. So you can use the ngIf for switching between the input text or the input controls. No, sorry, the input text fields and the text which is shown for the table. So we can use that. All right, any questions on this? So got a question, can we directly delete a component from the editor? Yeah, you can just delete the component like this. But if you delete a component from here, then you have to go to the app module and remove the declarations for that too. So like, let's say if I delete the article callouts component, so you have to remove it from here and remove it from the declarations too, like this. Otherwise, it will give you error that the particular file is not present. I don't think so. There is a command for it. You have to manually do this process. Yeah, so you have to manually do this process. So there is no command for it. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what we have done till now. So you have seen the data binding demo, 4 types of data binding. We have spent a lot of time on it. So I took all the questions on it. I think everybody is clear how data binding works in Angular. Okay, so second is bind data with a shopping component. So this example is for passing a data from top level component to the child level component. And this is something which we already have done by using inputs in the last session. So if you want to recap on it, you can go to the video for the last session. If you're fine with it, it's fine. Otherwise, we can discuss this in the tomorrow's session too. We haven't covered the output part, and we'll cover the output part in the tomorrow's session. Okay, so this approach for input is for implementing data from parent to child, and output is for sending data from child to parent. So output is something we haven't covered, and we'll cover this in the tomorrow session. Okay, so I got a question. When do we have to update the declarations and when we have to update the import? So declarations we have to update when you are creating a component or deleting a component manually. The import section is whenever you are adding a new Angular module into your application, then you have to add it. Like when you're using forms module, you're using HTTP module, animation module, then you have to manually tell Angular that I want to use these specific modules. So these are the import section is generally not updated too much because you're not going to like every day you are importing some new packages. There are only limited packages which you can import. Declarations is something which you don't need to touch if you are not deleting any component. Okay, so next is the fun part over here where you can do animations in Angular. So Angular allows you to write animation logic, which will allow you to show some content, show some content, or even like move the content on based on your CSS requirements. Now, people who are coming from HTML, CSS background, they will say like, why Angular has this own new framework? Because CSS uh, natively supports animations in it. Yes, it does, but the way how Angular processes the template, it's quite different and it will not be compatible with how CSS animations work. So that's why Angular has a dedicated module for enabling animations in our code. So what animations does, it allows you to animate some content. So like you have some content on the screen, you want to move that content from left to right, or show that and component with some opacity or some kind of a fancy behavior, you can use animations for it. So let's see how they are implemented. So see, animations are not natively added into your code. So you have to import a module which is called as browser animation module to set up animations in your component. So here, first thing for us would be going to the app module file, and over here we're going to say Angular browse animation, and we want to use the browser module, or we can just use Angular animations, and we'll say where is it? Oh yeah, so I'm writing it wrong actually. It's going to be from platform browser animations, and we'll write browser animation module. So this is for enabling animations in your browser environment, and this module has to be added into the imports. So very simple thing to remember: components and directives and pipes, they will all go to the declaration section. Okay, and any module which you're adding, that will go to the import section. So we'll write this as a module. So we'll say browser animation module, it will go to the import section. So this will allow me to write animations in my component. So let's start with animation now. Okay, so to enable animations in my code, I have to go to the specific component where I want to add the animation. Okay, so let's go to that. So let's say what we can animate in our case. So in my case, I would like to animate these boxes over here. So these boxes which are loaded on the screen, I would like to animate them. So they load up on the screen with some animation. So they load up with some smooth animation in them. So how do we implement animations for them? So we'll go to this component. For each box, we have this callout component. So we'll go to the callout component. Okay, so this is the callout component. In the callout component TS file, in the metadata, we can pass the animation section. So this is a optional section. So you can see in the interface, animations is optional, not required. So I'll write animations, what animations are supported. So we'll write array, and we have to assemble an animation over here. So it's little more of a configuration which you have to do. So for adding this configuration, we need to import a few packages in our code. Sorry, few methods in our code. So those will come from import from Angular animations. And what we want to do is we want to import package methods like trigger, state, style, transition. So all of these are going to be required. So and animate. So these are few methods. Based on these, we have to create an animation configuration, like how the animation will work. First is that we have to set up a trigger point, that what is the current state of the animation. So that is maintained by the trigger. So here we're going to say trigger in the array. So write trigger. Okay, in this we have to define different states of our animation. So first of all, trigger will have a name in it. So the name of this trigger will be loading or load. Okay, and it will take a array as an input. So this is the name of the trigger, which is called as load. And what states I have for this element. So over here, I want to write there is a state where the item is not loaded. And if the item is not loaded, what is the CSS I want to pass for it? So I want to add some CSS style over here. So I will write the style method and pass in the required CSS. So I will say if the item is not loaded, then it has an opacity of 0. So it will be hidden on the screen. Okay, so why I am getting this error? Let's fix this first. Style is okay. So here I've written in one line. So we'll say opacity is going to be 0 when the item is not loaded. What should be the opacity for it? Opacity means the transparency. So this will remove the item from the screen. If the item is loaded, what will be the state of it? So that will be 1. Okay, so now I have to define a transition, that how the item gets animated. So we have to define a transition. So in this transition, we have to define the flow. If the item is not loaded and goes to the loaded state, it should animate, and we'll write an animate method in it. And how will it animate? So we'll write how much time will it take to animate. So it will take 1 second. Okay, so the second line, if the item is in the loaded state and goes to unloaded state, how will it animate? So here we can write 500 milliseconds. So it's a much faster animation in that case. And yep, that's it. So this configures my animation, and this is my trigger. So trigger is the element on which you want to run this animation on. So I want to run this animation on the HTML over here and this tag. So over here, I'll write square brackets. It's a property binding, but with a different syntax. We write @ and the trigger over here. The trigger name would be loaded. Oh, sorry, load. And what is the state of this trigger right now? The state of this trigger is going to be loaded. Okay, so directly I will write as loaded like this. Okay, so let's run this code and let's see, does it animates? Okay, I can't see any animation going on. Let's check the element over here. Okay, set to opacity 1. So that's correct. Okay, so what we'll do is in the CSS, here it is, we'll set the div tag in it to be opacity 0. Okay, why it is so quick? One second, let's change the flow for it. Give me a minute. Oh, this is fine. Yeah, now it's working. So what I did is I just enabled it for any state to any state. So when you see this now, you will see the animation loads up. So it loads the element with small animation feeding in the element content now. Okay, so try this code. Actually, even if I do this demo on my screen, it will not be very clear because of the screen share delay. But if you run this code on your system, it should give you a small animation running on. Okay, so it will give you a small animation that the text fades in after some time. So try this out. So what changes I need to do is only in the HTML, we have to write this animation flow. And in the HTML, we have to say which element I want to animate. Okay, any questions? So I got a few questions. Can we write animations in a separate file and then import them into the TS code? Yes, we can. So we can create an animation logic out of the component and import that animation into a code by using the use animation method, and we can create animation outside of a component by using the animation method. I can show you that. Next is, will you be explaining about ng on init? What is the actual purpose, or as it's always used in our export class? Yes, so that's something which we have as a next topic. So it's a lifecycle hook. But if we are done with the animations, there are a few animations I have to show you. If we are complete with the animations, I will cover the lifecycle hooks today. Otherwise we'll do them in the tomorrow session. That what is a lifecycle hook? Next question which I got is, what kind of data binding is @load? So the load over here means the trigger. See the trigger which I added over here, that's the load value. When you have in front of any property binding like this, that means you are binding a animation, and the trigger for that is this. Okay, so that will add your code. Okay, so you can see this is how my animation works. Okay, so any other questions on it? Okay, I think no questions on it. So one thing I want to show you is in my code, if you run this code which I have given you, there is one small problem. Let me show you that. Give me a second. So what will happen is when I do the animation on this element, you can see the borders remain like this, only the text fades in. The borders are still over there every time, but the text only fades in at this point. Why this is happening is because the animation which I'm running, that is attached to this div element, and the div element is the one which shows the text content. But the border which I have, if you go to the CSS code, the border is implementing on the host element. So problem is there is always an element on the screen which is not being animated and it has some CSS. And solution to this problem would be that I should move the animation to the host element instead of any other nested element in this case. So right now the animation runs on this div tag, but it should actually run on the host element to make it properly work. So how do I access the host element? In the HTML, there is no direct way, but if you go to the TS code, you can write a code over here to access the host element. So I've written the code over here. So what you have to do is you have to write a new decorator in the class. This is the host binding decorator. It allows you to bind to the host and assign a animation to it. So you can write host binding, and the host, you want to bind a property which is the animation which we have, the @load animation, and it will accept a function. This function will be used for getting the current state of the animation. Is it loaded or not loaded? So what I'm doing is I'm hard coding over here that this animation is in the loaded state. So when this code runs, this function returns me the state which goes to my animation over here and loads the animation. Now in my HTML, I don't need to add this trigger. So I can remove it from here. And in the CSS, I can say this CSS opacity is not going to be on the div element, but it is going to be on the host element. So that if the host is been having the opacity, then the border and everything will be removed from the screen at this point. So now when I run this animation, you will see the border and everything fades in with the content. Instead of keeping the border on the screen and only the content fades in, the complete box now fades in one single go. So you can use host binding to animate. There are a few other things what you can do is, like you can say, you can move the content a little bit. So you can write an animation concept like this and say it has margin, like from the top you have a margin of 10 pixel, okay, like this, but we'll increase it to like 30 pixel, right? And in the animation concept now, in the logic now, where I'm animating it, I can write a CSS over here. When this element loads, the margin of this should be, margin top should be 10 pixel. Now when I run this code, it will animate and move the element like a little bit onto the top. See, it moves the element like top. So you can write like you can write fancy animations where you want to move it here and there, show some different content based on it. Okay, so if you are playing with animation, so you should be good with CSS so that you know how a particular element has to move and be, or how it has been structured in the code so that it's easy for you to animate that element. Okay, so I can show you more examples of this, like you can write translate give me a second. So you can see over here, I can write an animation that can move the elements on the screen. So there is a property called as transform. So you can write how do you want to rotate the content. So you can say, okay, I want to rotate the content by 10 degrees over here. So when the content loads, it moves like 10 degrees over here. So you can play with different CSS properties. Okay, so I got a question. What is this transition, which is square, sorry, asterisk, arrow asterisk? It means from any state to any state. So what you can do is you can program your animations to be in different states. Like, is it in the loaded state? Is it in the not loaded state? Or is it in different states? So different states can have animations for them. So when you navigate from one state to another state, you can set up different times for it. That like if you're in the not loaded state and you're now loading, so how much animation time will it give you? So you can control that, or you can say star dot star, sorry, star arrow star. That means from any state to any state, when you're going, it will take this much of time or animation flow for it. So right now, it always takes me like 1 second for this animation to work. So I got a question. The animation is continuous. I want to just one-time animation. Then it should stop at its place. How to stop the animation? So it is only it's implemented in a one stop way only. So it only animates once and then it stops over here. So I think that's already working in this code. So this is not a continuous animation. This is designed in a way. So once the element is loaded, then it will stop. If you're refreshing it again and again, so it will continue to run, but it will stop once you loaded the screen. Okay, any other questions? I will commit this code on the GitHub. Okay, any other questions? If you want to try this out, I will do one thing. I will send you the code for it. So this is the TS code. This is the HTML for it. And this is the CSS for it. So please try this out and then we can continue. Okay, so in this animation, what I did is I used over here a transition that which state I am in right now and I'm navigating from. So there is pre-built states also, like pre-built operators over here. So if you want to have animation, like when some element enters on the screen, you can say enter, and this will run when any element is added on the screen. So it will run the same way, but it will only run when you are adding some element. And if you're removing some element from the screen, then you can write a leave state also. So what will happen to the animation when the element is left the screen? Okay, so that can be added. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so I think today we will not be able to complete the lifecycle hooks because we took a lot of time in the start time to answer all the questions, and a lot of time was also spent in covering out any issues which people are having. So we'll cover the lifecycle hooks in the tomorrow session. So it's a simple topic where we're going to cover what kind of lifecycle hooks are provided. Lifecycle hooks are events which your component triggers automatically depending on what state it is in. Like, is it loading, removed from the screen, or the properties have been updated? So these are some events which automatically get triggered uh, by the component. So you might have already seen there is a ng onInit lifecycle hook, which is already in the component code. So we'll cover these, what lifecycle hooks are available in the tomorrow session. Okay, so in the time which is left now, I will go through the assignment. So you can complete the assignment without the knowledge of lifecycle hooks because it doesn't require that. So you can see the assignment over here. The assignment is you have to demonstrate a two-way data binding logic in which you have a component for edit and update. What you have to do is you have to create a table which will show the details of an employee. So you have to create an employee component. In that table, you will have to create an interface. With the interface will have employee ID, first name, last name, salary, date of birth, email, and action. So all of them are going to be string type in the interface. Use this interface in your employee component and create a data hard coded in your component. Okay, so you will create some dummy data in the component. Now what you have to do is there should be two buttons at the last. So there's already a mockup for it. There should be a button, update button and edit button. So when you click on the update button, all of the text should be replaced with the input boxes. And when you say update, the text should the input boxes should be changed with the regular text. okay, like this only. So the example would need, this assignment would need you to know about ngIf, because you can create a property that which mode you are in right now, like same thing which I did in the gallery, to know that are you in the edit mode or not. So if you are on the edit mode, write an ngIf, instead of text you show the input boxes. If you are in the content, like if you are not in the edit mode, then you can just remove the input boxes by setting the ngIf to be false and show the regular text on the screen. So it's the same concept which I have done in the gallery. You can use the same. If you're not able to complete this, we can discuss this in the tomorrow session. So no worries, no rush into it. You can cover this in the tomorrow session too. But try to use the same code which is in the gallery component and try to implement this. So what would be the type of action in the interface? So all of the values in the action will be, sorry, the interface will be string types. Okay, so I got a question. What is the meaning of exclamatory mark that is used with the article? Please explain. I forgot. I think you are referring to over here. Okay, so what's happening is this article callout is receiving a property from the parent, and we don't have the value of that right now because it's a property which your parent sends to the child. That is based on input, and I don't have a default value for it. So if you like, ideally what we should do is we should write like this. We should say, okay, it's equal to some object and the object has some properties in it. Okay, in my case I don't have any default values which I want to pre-populate in this code. So what I will do is I don't have any default value, so I will say, okay, no worries, I will receive the value in the future. So I'll just write exclamation mark. So it tells the TypeScript code that there is no default value right now, but in the future I will receive this value, so don't worry, it will give you the value. Okay, so I got a message. Can we write? Can we mention email type as number or string or only string? You can mention it, but generally email addresses are strings only. If you want to write two data types on a single property, you should write like this. That's called as a union type. Over here, I'll show you an example. Like, so let's say I have a property called as public email, and I want this to be a string or a number or a null. So whatever types you want to support for it, you can write like this. So it can be a string, it can be a number or a null value. So you write a pipe symbol and define what types are going to be supported for it. Okay, and you can also use any interface also over here. So you can say this can also be a interface which we have for the article. So it can be a, now if I want to use this, now if I use this, if it's a email, so it's a string value based on what type of value I'm going to assign to it. So if I'm going to assign it to this dot email is going to be a number. So now all the methods are going to be for a number. If I'm assigning it to a string, all the methods are going to be for a string. If I actually assign it to an object, then it will give me a error that all these properties have to be fulfilled in it. So I have to fulfill all the properties and then it will work. Okay, any question? Okay, so I think I don't have any questions. So what's next then? We have another 5 minutes left. So if you have any
Hello.
questions, we can. Yep. Who's this?
I have Sunat. Hello.
Yep.
Uh, as you have told that in the article that is small letter, it means yeah, after the input decorator that it is not receiving any value. Okay.
Hmm.
Hello.
Hmm.
Yeah. So in the HTML file, we are doing that the article dot title. So how it is fetching that means I'm not I didn't got that point. Can you go to the HTML file of that article call out component HTML file? Yes. Here it is written the article dot title. So as article is not receiving in any value, so from where it is getting that value, title value?
So okay, so it's not receiving the value when this component loads, but it receives the value in the future.
Okay, means right now it is not
Yeah.
loading any value.
Yeah. So see, when a component loads, it's not that it automatically loads something. There is different stages in it. So we haven't covered the lifecycle hooks, but what
Yes,
happens is
yes.
it goes through multiple stages, that it receives properties, it gets stabilized, and then it receives more properties and all. So when this component loads, on the immediate load, when this component gets initialized, it doesn't have the property value. But later on in the future, it will have some value to it. So that's why this code is working. But see, if I write a code over here like this, if I write something which is not available, so it will actually give me an error in that case. So it assumes the value is going to come in the future. Even if you don't send the value, then it will actually fail. So see, if I go to the call out component over here, the top news data, the HTML,
Okay.
let's say I will remove this and assign it to an object like this. Okay, or it's going to ask me for this interface to be provided. Okay, we can do one thing. So here, let's say I remove some value. Okay, okay, when I run this code, yeah, it's going to ask me for passing this value. So I will say this is a value which is not available. Now, even if I run this code, it's going to print the value. So it's not going to give me an error. The thing is, it knows that the value is going to come in the future, and it will wait for it if there is some error right now. So because everything is right now hard coded, so it's a little hard to configure this kind of error scenario. But if you're getting the data from an API, in that it knows that the API takes some time. It's an asynchronous request. You send a network request, the network will return you the data, and you will make it available. In that case, it makes sure that the component, whenever it loads, it doesn't gives you error that, hey, I don't have the data. It just tells you that, okay, I will wait. The data will come in the future, and I will map that assign to the right component, or to the right data type in that case.
Okay. And can you go to that that file HTML part call out dot no articles call outs, yes, HTML part. No, call outs, call outs, yes. Yes. In can you explain that article property that you have written on one value? That means news of the item means suppose one item is storing in the article property. Like this, it is working. So how
Yeah.
it works now?
So this is one component, and I'm repeating the
Okay.
component 4 times or n number of times based on how many news I have. Okay, so I have
Okay.
4 items in the news. This is hard coded right now. So I have 4 items in the news. So what I'm doing is I'm iterating or repeating this 4 times. So each time I get one news, and that is assigned to the item property, item variable over here. This is a variable locally over here. Okay, this local variable has been passed to my article property as a value. Now this article property is been received in my article callout component as an input over here, because I'm writing
Yes.
input article. Now it
Mm.
receives this single item over here. So the whatever data is passed into the article property, that has been assigned to this article property over here.
Okay, that means now it is not vacant. Now it is getting the value.
Yeah. So when the code runs, it automatically gets the value.
Okay, and the in the news part there is a four things. So one by one it is coming because there is a for loop also.
Yeah. So one by one it prints out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, so I think we can wrap up the session for today. And guys, please submit the feedback after the session, and any improvements you feel or any feedback you want to give for the session, please submit in that feedback form. And let's meet tomorrow, and we'll see how to implement lifecycle hooks and also implement services in our code. So let's see what's the next topic. Just give me a minute. I will just show you what's the next topic which we have. So we have the next topic as directives. So we're going to create, implement our directives. So we have used the nga for ng4 directives. We're going to use our own directives, create our directives in our code also. So let's see how they work in the next session tomorrow. Right. So that's it for today's session. Thank you everyone for joining in. Have a nice day ahead. Take care. Bye. Thank you. Bye.